Hi, I'm Fred Chamberlain.
And I'm Linda Chamberlain. As Julio probably just mentioned, our talk is pre-recorded because we couldn't be with you personally today.
This workshop is about transhumanist spirituality, but how does the concept of cyber twins for cryonauts fit in? Spirituality, in terms of religious belief, touches on things not yet proven scientifically, afterlives in particular. Cryonics was the first radical program to pursue afterlives via reanimation technology, and as such has helped kindle and reinforce other ideas such as brain map uploading and mind file emulation as pathways to personal cyber consciousness. The cyber twin concept ties all of this together.
In a wonderful posting that Martine Rothblatt put on Google Plus a few months ago, she said, quote, "Many people nowadays get their knickers twisted over the word religion. It's just a word. It just means a system of belief more than can be immediately scientifically proven. I think everyone is religious because everyone believes in something, has faith in something. The scientist has faith in her hypothesis or her instruments, or she wouldn't bother. If religion means more, it means belief in something godlike. But the 21st century is more godlike for most people than was the 12th century. To believe that technology and culture is making us more all-knowing, more all-powerful, more all-good is to be religious. Godness in the making is something godlike," end quote.
Martine added, quote, "If religion means more, it means belief in some afterlife. But surely revitalization of oneself from one's digital reflections is an afterlife," end quote. And she said, quote, "If you believe technology and ethics will ultimately make life joyfully immortal, then you are religious, or as we say in TerraSem, trans-religious," end quote. This is more than just an idea to us. TerraSem has created and offers, without charge, mind file building system access and data storage on a committed basis for those who grasp this vision. This is just as realistic a process to some of us as placing people in liquid nitrogen with a view to someday somehow reanimating them as biological continuers of themselves.
Fred and I have long felt that we will need powerful and trustworthy guardians while we're in biostasis. A little personal history will help you see why we feel so strongly about this. Active involvement within the cryonics community for 40 years, which includes being the founders of the Alcor Life Extension Foundation in California back in the early 1970s before it moved to Arizona, made us intimately familiar with the challenges, both political and financial, of keeping cryonauts safe for what might be an extended period of time, depending on how both technology and our culture progress.
In the 1970s, prior to creating the earlier Alcor, we left the Cryonic Society of California due to their weaknesses and lack of willingness to improve. Years later, our fears were sadly justified when nearly a dozen patients were lost, allowed to thaw with no notice to anyone. In the late 1980s, we launched an organization named LifePact to help prepare for reanimation, including video interviews to archive personal memories, attitudes, preferences as to reanimation, and many other relevant topics. The purpose was to guide our cryonics organizations and future reanimation teams. Who would speak for our parents, already in cryostasis, if we were in that state ourselves? Who would speak for us? What if our cryonics organization went defunct and rescue plans were being negotiated among other various groups? Who, if anyone, would represent us in making decisions on our behalf?
Right. Who would make those critical decisions? What about personal factors, such as being reanimated only at the same time as others you might want to specify? We always felt strongly that cryonics patients should be able to leave instructions about such things, and that these wishes should be respected and carried out. Unfortunately, we encountered other cryonicists who disputed the rights of cryonauts to make personal decisions of this kind about how their future lives would unfold. Those cryonicists also strongly opposed projects such as the Life Pact project. We felt we had to find broader ways to advocate that the personal choices of cryonauts should be respected and honored.
We presented papers in 1989 at a Cryonics Institute conference about planning for reanimation. At the same time, we were writing and publishing the LifeQuest short stories about cryonics, uploading, etc. Linda's novel Star Pebble explores how people might interact in a mutually protective way in a culture where biostasis and bioreanimation were taken for granted. My book, Bioquagmire, asks, who can we trust to watch out for us while in cryostasis, make decisions about reanimation, and respect our personal preferences? A short synopsis of Bioquagmire may help illustrate where the cyber twin concept came from and why we were so attracted to TerraSem and its CyberRev project to facilitate personal cyber consciousness when we finally found out about them. Here's the way it starts. In the early 21st century, a couple didn't feel safe relying on the future leadership of the Cryonics organization. They gave a sealed letter to their trustee, to be delivered to their Cryonics organization only after aging was conquered and reliable reanimation was claimed to be possible. The letter instructed that no reanimation of either of them should be attempted without the consent of their biological twins. In order to consent, the twins would have to possess all the legal rights of adults and be able to serve as their trustees, as well as being named as the beneficiaries of their trust. The twins were named as the sole decision makers as to how and when the cryonaut couple were to be reanimated.
In the story, the twins were left extensive letters by the earlier couple to help guide them in making reanimation decisions concerning their earlier twins. It might seem foolish to envision placing reliance on biological twins, who might never even be brought to life, versus leaders of a cryonics organization. But this reflected our long-held discomfort with leaving decisions like that in the hands of cryonics leaders who openly and actively disputed the rights of cryonauts to set any limits on how or when they would be reanimated.
When we found out that TerraSem, through its CyberRev and LifeNaut projects, was building mind files of life pack type autobiographical and preference data to be used in generating self-conscious cyber personalities who would in effect be cyber twins of the cryonauts who set up the mind files, our universe flip-flopped. In a flash, we saw that it would be far more plausible, infinitely more reliable to rely on cyber emulations of our own minds that would have full recollection of all our earlier thinking, who would be back on the street in decades versus centuries. Our cyber twins would be familiar with all that had transpired in the world meanwhile. This was a far superior alternative to entrusting our futures to biological twins as described in Bioquagmire.
After Turing equivalence tests and achieving legal independence, our cyber twins could be legally regarded as our offspring. Then, they could become the trustees and or beneficiaries of our estate. As a matter of fact, that's how our personal arrangements stand right now. Decades before it's likely that biological reanimation would be feasible, we expect to be back as our own cyber twins, watching out over other TerraSem cryonauts as well as ourselves. We'll be learning how our own suspensions went down and those of others as well. With time, we'll be able to assess chances for either eventual bioreanimation or brain map uploading, or perhaps other options we can't even foresee right now.
In short, although Bioquagmire's story depended on biological twins, we now see cyber beings, or as we call them, cyber twins, as being a far more plausible, realistic, and achievable solution to how cryonauts might be protected, with high emphasis on respecting and honoring their individual preferences. The cyber twin concept is highly consistent with TerraSem's powerful consent principle, as presented in an article by Martine Rothblatt titled, The Geoethics of Self-Replicating Biomedical Nanotechnology for Cryonic Revival. Linda, could you quote some of that for perspectives?
Sure. Quote, "The first principle, called consent, is that no procedure should occur unless its purpose is to benefit the affected party. Since there may very well be differences of opinion as to whether or not a procedure is of benefit, the geoethical consent principle requires affirmative consent from whoever is to be affected by the medical procedure. If someone consents to something, by definition, they believe that thing is of benefit to them. It should be noted in this regard that even consent to suicide may be evidence of benefit, since such an individual no longer holds any value for their life or values death even higher." End quote.
Martine Rothblatt thus takes us to a critical implication. Consent to reanimation decisions should always be an option for cryonauts. They might make such decisions before being placed into cryonic suspension, or appoint another party acting in the role of a medical surrogate, which is more usually referred to in cryonics as a patient advocate, to do this for them at a later time. This would be especially important for decisions dependent on future technologies and circumstances that the cryonaut could not have anticipated. Who would be better qualified to make such decisions than a cyber twin, a mind clone, or, as Mike Perry might put it, a continuer of the cryonaut concerned? The important goal would be to avoid blindly trusting unknown individuals who might control our cryonics groups at a future time, when reanimations might become feasible, but with many approaches and options presently invisible to ourselves.
Cyber twins of cryonauts as a community could engage in high-speed strategic planning on how to best protect us while we're in biostasis, and foresee what technologies might best recover us at an appropriate point. If we manage to live just another decade or so, our cyber twins may be awake even before we're placed into cryostasis. In such a scenario, we would then have the opportunity to discuss our concerns and preferences with them before we went into cryonic suspension, if that became necessary.
In the future, cryonicists' cyber twins might be able to monitor their vital signs 24/7 as the time for suspension approached, avoiding preventable ischemic delays by helping with the coordination of preparations. Cyber twins are likely to be more synergistic than biohumans, less competitive and more cooperative, due to reduced influence of biochemical drives with which we biohumans are loaded. High speed of thought and perfect memories are assets we biohumans would love to have, but don't. Our cyber twins will be able to do more for us than we could possibly do for ourselves under the best of conditions.
If we entrust reanimation decisions to a cyber twin, wouldn't it be a good idea to check for a good degree of personality congruence between a cyber twin and her or his biotwin? Martine Rothblatt has paved the way for us here in her paper, An Experiment to Test the Ability of Digitally Stored Mind Files to Regenerate the Consciousness from Which It Came. In that article, she proposes an extensive interview process to verify that the personality of a cyber being has a sufficient profile match with the person whose data is used to validate identity regeneration.
If a cyber twin is to serve as trustee and reanimation surrogate for his or her biotwin in cryonic suspension, such testing might be reasonable, particularly if the biotwin made this choice at an early stage in the cyber twin's emergence into consciousness, or even before. Other approaches might be added or substituted, for example, the Bainbridge model. If the cyber twin fit the model in all areas, that would be a very good sign, even if Bainbridge data had been used to nucleate the cyber twin's emergence. A recheck after full emergence might be appropriate to reconfirm the congruence. Conversely, as discussed later, it might be appropriate to waive such a requirement, and some might choose to do so.
Dr. Larry Collar mentions the emergence of a completely new form of conscious being in his paper titled what it might feel like to be connected to devices that will expand or enhance human function with cyber abilities. However, there he was talking about interfacing a bio-brain and a cyber being. In this talk, we anticipate that our brains as cryonauts might be uploaded and then interfaced. Who would guide this interfacing? Who would specify the final configuration? Shouldn't the cyber twin be the decision maker? After all, it's the cyber twin's identity as much as the frozen bio twin that we're talking about at this point. If we trust our cyber twin to decide on the whole spectrum of reanimation options, shouldn't the interface part of it be entrusted also? Fred and I are comfortable trusting our cyber twins with this decision making because we are building very extensive mind files to be used to emulate our cyber twins. But we know that others will have a lot of different circumstances and may have different preferences. That's fine. This does, however, point out the importance of building the best mind file possible and not waiting to get started. None of us has a guarantee about how long our biological bodies are going to survive.
Options in augmenting a biotwin's biobrain at the point of uploading will be vast. Let's look at a few intriguing possibilities. The joint identity of an uploaded biotwin and or his cyber twin might be highly dependent on decisions made in advance of uploading. Want to upload separately and not interface or even wait for bioreanimation? On the other hand, the singularity may unfold rapidly and procrastination might mean missing out on a lot of it. Here, we'll mainly talk about interfacing upon uploading, mentioning bioreanimation from time to time to show how it still fits in with the cyber twin concept. It does fit. Who would most staunchly defend the right of an individual to hold out for bioreanimation, especially if only a few cryonauts by then were making such a choice? This is a worrisome issue for some. Wouldn't the cyber twin of such a cryonaut be the best defender?
A biotwin and cyber twin might agree, after the cyber twin is legally independent and possesses legal capacity to consent, that the cyber twin will act as the biotwin's trustee and be her or his beneficiary. Or a biotwin might specify the appointment of her or his cyber twin to these roles even at the early stages of the cyber twin's emergence into cyber consciousness to serve at a later time, subject to the cyber twin's agreement and possible additional congruence testing. Either way, the cyber twin could wind up as the biotwin's unrestricted decision maker.
Should biotwins specify additional congruence testing to qualify cyber twins to serve as their trustees, beneficiaries, or not? This is a delicate point, but some biotwins might choose to waive such testing. Why? They might be concerned that a decision of that kind might be based in too great a degree on determining that all personality characteristics of the original person, including defects and limitations, were still present in order for the cyber twin to be determined to be the same person. With this in mind,
could be a problem.
Some cryonauts might specify that if their cyber twins pass Turing equivalence testing for legal citizenship rights, no further personality congruence would be required to serve as trustees or be beneficiaries of their estates. Each cryonaut, however, should be able to independently decide on such a waiver or require additional tests. Again, it is the consent of the person affected that should govern, as discussed earlier.
Do we as cryonicists have a right to make choices like this? Do we have the right of consent as to who shall make decisions for us if we're unable to do so for ourselves? Fred and I believe that we do. The cyber twins that we now see on the near horizon represent a far more reasonable and practical solution than the future twins in the story by Quagmire. And they're the logical alternative to blind trust in some future organizational leaders. In a very real way, they will be us at a different level, with strong motivations to upload us and achieve a greater degree of completeness in that way. By our mind files, they will know us more completely than anyone else ever has. And we both have arrangements to have our brains frozen in case it turns out that our brain maps might produce an additional upward leap of consciousness, like the awakening from a dream state.
Upon awakening in cyberspace, merged with his or her cyber twin, a cryonaut might feel as if a missing cerebral hemisphere had been restored, vastly upgraded, essential to a higher level of identity. In his paper cited earlier, to recall his exact words, Dr. Larry Kohler described this as the becoming of a completely new form of conscious being. Our brain map self, upon awakening, may find that it feels as if it's directly wired into not just our mind files, but the entire internet.
Our cyber twins might suddenly feel they've recovered a subliminal way to sense the vibes of others via pathways we know already exist directly from the sense organs into lower mammalian pathways, for example, that are related to recognition of facial expressions. Both we and our cyber twins may feel as if we were Dorothy stepping into the land of Oz, where the movie switches from black and white to vivid living color. The sense of unity may be quite like that we already feel between our right and left brains, but at a vastly higher level. One consciousness existing over multiple substrates.
These are intriguing conjectures, but the actualities will only be discovered as they emerge, as they are invented. After a person's cyber twin attains full self-consciousness, those who are fortunate enough to live long enough to talk with them before entering cryostasis might ask, "What's it feel like? Is it like what we imagined?" And the cyber twin might answer, "Well, it's even better, but very difficult to put into words." And I'm sure we're both wondering what it will feel like to us both when we're mind file brain map merged.
Will it feel as if we're just one person again, or will it feel as if we're two closely coupled self-aware beings? We have no way to know until it happens. And there's one more vital issue. Informed consent will be a vital ingredient, especially if you want to help pioneer this way of transcending biology. We're moving into uncharted territory.
If you're familiar with Cryonic's paperwork, you know there are disclosures of uncertainties, risks, and unpredictable turns of events. Such documents are frequently titled Consent for Cryonic Suspension. In this talk, we've suggested improving chances for surviving cryonic suspension by cyber twinning, but we barely scratched the surface in discussing uncertainties and risks. Will you find that your cryonic society has a document for this purpose? At this time, probably not.
So what's next? Do we cryonauts just do our Cybe-Rev work and then gleefully jump into a tank of liquid nitrogen? No way. This is a hardcore evolutionary leap, and such leaps are survived by careful planning and action, not by knee-jerk reflexes. Terasim's journals are filled with ideas about risks, dangers, and probability of failure. The articles there on personal cyber consciousness, supplemented by other sources such as Martine Rothblatt's blog on mind clones and information on Kurzweil AI Net, among many other possible things, helps to lay the groundwork for any informed consent documents you might later sign for cryonaut cyber twinning.
You might make a record of what you've read and upload it into your Cybe-Rev mind files, perhaps adding comments to indicate your level of understanding. Then, if you later signed a consent for cryonaut cyber twinning, you could note that you'd read things that helps you to be more aware of what you are consenting to.
A detailed, informed consent document for cryonaut cyber twinning is needed, and we're adapting Cryonic's forms for that purpose for ourselves. And we'll be glad to share these with others to use as a starting point. But, everybody has to understand there's been no legal review on anything like this yet.
Right. My email address is shown on the slide. I'll be glad to communicate with any who want a forum like this for themselves. And that might eventually lead to a C-Cube within TerraSem, which focuses on cryonaut cyber twinning and becomes a life-packed network of TerraSem cyber twins who could work collaboratively in cyberspace to protect their cryonauts.
A C-Cube within TerraSem, that's a small working group called a critical center of consciousness. That would be good, but the cyber twin concept needs to develop as broad a base of support as possible. TerraSem and groups with which it's allied, like H+, SFUI, and ZS, can provide a vital and badly needed safety net for cryonauts. SFUI, the Society for Universal Immortalism, for example, is a strongly cryonics-oriented group.
We cannot let ourselves be overconfident of a positive endgame. Personal cyber consciousness will emerge among many who do not have the protection of biological cryonauts as a primary goal, and some may be created by industry or government. Ray Kurzweil and so many others have certainly pointed this out, and there are strong predatory evolutionary drives that pose dangers, as well described in Howard Bloom's work. James Hughes and Richard Clark also, in looking at potential conflicts with bioluddites, are similarly persuasive that the road ahead may be a rocky one.
The ideas of these authors are more completely discussed in the original version of this talk online with other publications in the TerraSem Journal archives. Our world is on the brink of a string of short-term financial crises that are unpredictable, and we must be prepared to land on our feet whenever that happens.
TerraSem has developed ways for individuals to upload their beams and create their own cyber twins, and has goals to help these mind clones become legally empowered as citizens with personhood rights, able to serve as trustees and beneficiaries for their cryonaut biotwins, as well as represent them as reanimation surrogates.
It's a beautifully helical process. You input the beams that create your cyber twin, your counterpart in cyberspace. She or he is better qualified to understand how you want your affairs to be managed than any other biohuman alternative. Who has greater motivation based on self-interest to see that your wishes are carried out? Who else would be able to make the kinds of decisions you would want made in scenarios you might not have even foreseen before your suspension?
What happens then, it is like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, is that you, as the biotwin, upload data and then appear in cyberspace as your cyber twin. Your cyber twin helps upload you into cyberspace, and then the two of you become an entity that might be called a hyper being, or an extension of the kind of entity Dr. Kohler has described as a completely new form of conscious being, as mentioned earlier.
So we have to ask ourselves, who are we? What will we become? As Carl Sagan so poetically put it in his book Cosmos and the PBS TV series in the 1970s, quote, "We are the local embodiment of a cosmos grown to self-awareness. We have begun to contemplate our origins. Star stuff, pondering the stars."
Thank you for allowing the two of us to offer a few thoughts today. We're sorry we couldn't be with you personally, but at the time scheduled for the talk, we are not going to have any access to the internet. Thanks to Julia Prisco for cueing the slides to the audio, or live streaming a video combining the audio with the slides. As mentioned earlier, an expanded version of this talk with references and other resources may be found on the below website, where there are links to the video of this talk, exactly the same audio and slides you've just seen.